It's a great pleasure to be here. I did come back from a 9-day trip in Europe just last night. So for me, it's 10 p.m. right now. So bear with me. But it's definitely nice to be here. I was able to sit through several of the sessions today. And today I'm going to talk to you about my favorite subject, innovation. And when Dennis and I had a quick call about the content of the presentation, he asked that I talk more about how we innovate. What is it that makes Xerox a great innovation engine, and learned over the multiple decades of innovation that we do as a company, and especially in the research centers such as PARC. I will share 5 best practices, which most probably many of you also have embraced within your own organization. Okay, so we are helping our clients in many, many areas, some of which you might not be aware of. For example, we have a $2 billion healthcare business processing close to 1 billion healthcare claims for the government and the private insurance companies, or we're in multiple hospitals, about 2,000 in North America, helping them with their IT infrastructure. We do benefits management. We do a lot in transportation, from parking to public transport to highway, toll booths, et cetera, building the smart cities of the future. And you can go through the list here. In customer care, we answer 1.6 million phone calls for our customers every day, 1.6 million of phone calls each day. So a lot of transactional processes. And of course, in my role as CTO, the idea is, how do we automate these processes? How do we use all these billions of transactions that we do each day to mine them for insights and create more value for our clients? That's at a high level in what we do. So it's analytics, it's automation, it's agile enterprise, personalization, all with the foundation of creating sustainable enterprises and societies. But before I talk about today, let me go back several decades. So Business Week is a business magazine, and the cover article in 1975 was about the Office of the Future. And in this article, George Pick, the co-founder of PARC, the Palo Alto Research Center, was interviewed. He was asked, how do you envision the Office of the Future? And George said, I'm going to try to quote him, you could search his article. He said something like, he envisions that on each desk there will be something like a TV terminal, and with the click of a button, he can send messages to his colleagues around the globe. And this was right when IBM was introducing the color, when IBM when computers filled the whole room and the color typewriter was recently introduced. So how did George Pick know this? Well, as Dennis pointed out, before 1975, these were some of the prototypes that were in our labs. For example, the mouse-driven interface. The mouse itself was invented down the street at SRI, but how to use a mouse to manipulate images on your screen. The Ethernet by Bob Metcalfe while he was at PARC in the early 70s. Desktop computing. Of course, printing, which resulted in a $100 billion market. Laser printing was invented at PARC. So in fact, it became very profitable for our company, at least this particular invention at PARC. And then this was also a prototype that was in the labs. And so as you can see today, these are products that are still in the market 44 decades later. And so the question is, and this was a Dynabook, and the quote here is by Alan Kay, the inventor of the Dynabook. It is, the best way to predict the future is to invent the future. Really be able to visualize what's the future going to look like, then create it, and of course, commercialize it. So PARC, which is one of our research labs, continues to pioneer change now also for, as I said, for over 4 decades. I mean, some of the inventions are on the top here. More recently, in about 12 years ago, we changed the business model of PARC. We incorporated PARC. It's wholly owned by Xerox. But it does now research services, innovation services for other clients. Half the revenue at PARC comes from doing research projects for Xerox, for our different businesses. The other half comes from doing research for other clients, some of you in the room, for the government, IP licensing, equity in startups, et cetera. So for those of you who are CTOs or who manage corporate captured research labs, I would tell you moving that into more of the business model of a research as a service has worked very well for us. In fact, these are the labs around the globe. We're also doing the same with the research center in Canada, which is basically all material science. It's a very, very strong competency there. And we are turning that also into a business, research as a service. And actually today, the announcement is, for example, that Authentics, which is a major company in security tagging for oil, for money, et cetera, has outsourced a significant amount of their research to Xerox, so a research lab in Canada, because of the expertise in material science. The other labs in New York, in Grenoble, in Bangalore is our newest lab and our joint venture with Fuji Xerox. Most of the other labs, with the exception of Fuji Xerox, the other three are focused on the services business today, which is growing and which has a high demand on the research being done in these labs. So let me start quickly with the definition of innovation. Innovation is truly creating differentiated customer value, so value for your users, the people going to use your technology, do it in a differentiated way. So what that means is you truly have to understand the pain points and the dreams of your clients. You map that with your own company visionary capabilities. You have to be able to envision the future with your own company's technological capabilities, and in our case also ethnographic capabilities to truly understand the client's pain points and dreams. And that ultimately will then lead to breakthrough top and bottom line growth for your clients and hence for your company. So some of the lessons we learned when doing that, when really practicing innovation, turning our inspiration into critical customer assets, is that innovation really happens at the focus of these three domains. It's about understanding human behavior and the context in which your technological advances will be used, whether it's new materials or new clean technology or new healthcare devices. It is mapping that with your strong technological expertise and know-how, which we have very strong. We're one of the major companies that still actually has corporate research labs. In addition to the research labs, of course, we have engineering divisions across the different business teams. And then the new models for the business, really figuring out what are the new business models so you become even more strategically critical to your client. So let's move to the 5 innovation best practices. Of course, since it's all about understanding the client's pain points and dreams, the first best practice is to truly understand your customers, or your client, the user's pain point and dreams. Because if you don't do that, then you might have this scale wrong. I mean, initially, especially in the 70s and the 80s, the research and development was often in totally separate, right? You do research, you hand it over to the engineers, and you hand it over to the manufacturing team, and then the sales team suddenly got these products, and the customer would then say, wow, I don't need all these features, or it's way too complex. Or, for example, Xerox introduced in the early 80s a color copier, and that was before there were color printers, there were almost no color printers, so why would you need a color copier, right? That's an extreme example. But the most important thing is that you solve the right problem. That scale needs to clearly be on the end of solving the right problem. And so how do you do that? This is a quote most probably many of you know, is that if Henry Ford at the time said, if I would have just asked, you can say, okay, I want to solve the right problem, I'm going to ask my customer, what's your problem? I mean, how can I solve it? But if you ask the customer what they wanted, in this case, he would have said a faster horse, because the customer doesn't necessarily understand the capabilities of the technology. Like many of the capabilities of like the Dynabook or some of the capabilities you saw in the 70s, many customers would not at that point have been able to articulate that that's really what they wanted. So how do we do it? We have several methodologies. One methodology we call dreaming sessions, right? It is bringing clients into each of the research centers, has like an innovation showroom, where clients, C-level members of the client management team would come, or future clients, and talk about their pain points. They would say, okay, this is my workflow, this is how I work. Then the researchers would show some of the capabilities, some of the prototypes, some of the inventions they've been working on. And then often there would be aha moments. Wow, you can do that. Would you also be able to do so or so? I mean, these other things. And then you start dreaming. That's why we call it dreaming sessions. And here you can see a dreaming session in action at the research center in Grenoble, for example. But as I said, often, I mean, even though that is trying to go beyond just asking the client what they want from us, it is having the client explain to us what their problems are, talking about their workflow, having these dreaming sessions. That alone is not enough. We do close to 1,000 dreaming sessions a year across the research lab. It's a lower cost way of getting to these pain points and these dreams, but it's not good enough. So because often what people say, what people do, and what people say they do are entirely different things. People might still say, oh, I do this, and this is how I approach it, but that's often not exactly how it happens. So one methodology for which we have experts across the research labs is ethnography, which we apply very early on in almost any new innovation project. It's a slightly higher cost approach, but you do send your ethnographic experts into the field, into the hospital, into the city, into the call center, to truly observe and understand how people work, how the users use technology today. And this is a methodology we have been applying for decades. We've always had ethnographic experts at Park, including in the 70s. Even in the new research center we opened only 3 years ago in Bangalore, one of the first 5 hires was an ethnographic expert. And before that, we sent Jackie, who was ethnographic expert in France already, into the villages in India to go observe people and how they work. So this is an extremely important methodology. And in fact, in Park, which, as I mentioned, has now been incorporated, one of the client innovation services we provide is ethnographic research and ethnographic expertise for our research services clients. And so that's the first thing, truly, and get very deep insights on your customers' pain points and dreams. But of course, that's not good enough. You have to have a true innovation culture. You need to create a culture where creativity and entrepreneurship can flourish. So it all starts with people. I mean, ultimately, startups know this very well. It's the same in large company. You need to have people who are passionate, as Chris said this morning, who know their stuff very, very deeply, and it can truly explore the unknown, move into areas where nobody has ever moved before. And what we have found is also that what's very important for people to truly be themselves at work is to create a diverse environment. Create an environment where women or people from different cultures, different religions, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people, old, young people, where everybody can truly be themselves, because then you can truly be a much better innovator. And in addition, our clients are very diverse around the world. So coming with a perspective, of different perspective, and ultimately having diversity of thought is obviously extremely important. Now, secondly is relationships. I even said relationships to the third here, because that's one thing, especially as an engineer or as new researchers, new innovators often forget. They just believe we have the best idea. So why don't people just take my idea, and why is it so hard to change and to have this funded and adapted? Because, I mean, whether you're a startup or whether you're a group trying to push change within a larger organization, you need funding, and there's always lots of competing resources. So creating strong relationships, understanding why are people feared or threatened by this new innovation, understanding all the value chain members you will need to collaborate with. So this strong human fabric, I call it, and building that across the value chain within your company and with, of course, your partners, open innovation partners, is very important. But then innovation culture is really a learning culture. You constantly, again, you're exploring the unknown, you're working with new business models, you're prototyping first-of-a-kind ideas with your clients. So you're constantly learning. So often people say, if you don't fail, you have to fail or you have to make mistakes. I would just say, and this is I forgot whose quote or whose image this is, but I came across it and really like it because it's not really let's make a mistake and move on. These are all experiments you do, right? As innovator, we experiment and we constantly build on what we have and make better things. So it's a learning culture. And so while learning, this notion of we're a learning culture leads to the next best innovation practice, which is agility. You have to make sure that you don't just focus on the next big thing, but you do things in a very agile way. So don't only focus on return of investments. You can do a lot with small step investments. And again, startups know this very well, but the same for large enterprises. You work with your clients and you really try to understand, as I say here, what's the minimum viable product. I mean, this is terminology that, of course, again, startups are very familiar with, but in large corporations, using these terminologies is extremely important too. For a while, I've been with Xerox for over almost 24 years now. But in the middle of it, I took a little sabbatical and went to work for Carrier Corporation. I was CTO at Carrier, the air conditioning company. And there we had this terminology. What are the give-ups? Because people, especially engineers, have the tendency to put all kind of great features into the product to make it the best product in the world from a technical point of view. And then we really had this, what do we need to differentiate? What are tickets to the game? And then what are the give-ups, right? So you really need to figure out what's the simplest product to address a really difficult problem, which we know through our dreaming sessions and understanding the pain points in ethnographic studies, but what is truly the minimum viable process. So at Xerox, and especially the researchers working with the clients and the business teams, and especially for services innovation, which is slightly different than product and materials innovation, but for the services business, we have created this very agile services innovation process where we do field studies, ethnographic studies. This is, for example, one in a hospital where we observe the nurses. What are their pain points? They had a lot of pain points, way too many to put in one super product. So we had design products, a design workshop with them. We did prototyping, build a prototype, have the nurses use it, and then reiterate and create a product. And in fact, this was a project which we just launched the product which is called, we call it digital nurse assistant, but I think it's just digital assistant for in hospitals, for nurses, physicians, and others to truly be able to help the patient instead of trying to do administrative tasks. We automated a lot of the administrative tasks in the background. So by having this repeatable services innovation process, you solve the right problem. That's very important. You understand how value is created, what is really the value that I will create for the hospital in this situation, and to avoid costly revisions after launch, because you co-create already with the clients, which is very important. So next is to leverage the world, the fourth innovation best practice. And of course, it's called open innovation. Is a buzzword we have been using for this in the industry for a while. Because, and many of you are familiar with this quote too, right? I mean, there's so many smart people, so many great companies in the world. And so if we can connect to them and build upon what these companies have and partner is very important. For example, in our research center in Canada, one of the first things we did when we decided to do research as a service is kind of who could be our great partners. And so we have a marketing agreement between the research center in Canada and Battelle to jointly provide research services. And so this is our lab and the pilot plant. I know many of you are in energy, so I wanted to put a little marketing pitch for our research services in chemistry and materials, et cetera, which we're going to be using. It's a small research lab. Research labs are not large. They're about 100 people, Ph.D. experts. Park is the largest at about 250 people. You don't need to be large. You need to have the right people with right mindset and doing good practices, and you can do an enormous amount of innovation. Another partner, and Jennifer Ernst, the business development manager of Thin Film, is in the room with us today. Another great partner we have is Thin Film. And as you can read a quote here from the CEO of Thin Film, it's others said that we should set out to achieve what wasn't possible. We partner with Park and they asked different questions. They got us on the right path is one of his quotes. So what Thin Film and Park have done is Thin Film has a great memory, plastic memory, which can have many, many applications. I'm going to show a short video here to show them. And they came to Park because of our very long history in printing electronics. In fact, we started that almost 15 years ago between the Materials Research Center in Canada and the Park Research Center to start building a competency in printing electronics. This was at the very early stages of this emerging field. So yes, you need to have patience. But Thin Film came to us, and I think you are the only publicly traded company in plastic electronics today that's solely focused on printing electronics, or at least in that field. One of the presentations this morning mentioned that we're really in the very early stages of what's possible with technologies like 3D printing. And one of the capabilities we've been working on, again, for a very long time, is how do you embed smarts in an object as it is being printed. That little ball you saw with the chips inside is actually an ink, and we have multiple colors ink, cyan, magenta, yellow, black. That is maybe memory chips, logic, batteries, whatever. You can actually print with an electrostatic process, and then while the object is being created, you embed the electronics. Because with plastic electronics, the speed of the devices is really not fast, as you all know. So if you can embed silicon in a 3D object while being printed, that's really the future. But again, you have to be patient because lots of inventions still required. And the good thing is the ecosystem. I mean, many companies are working together to make this possible. So next innovation practice is to really manage a portfolio of options and introduce new business models. I grouped them here together because, as you will see, depending on which options you look at, you might need new business models to truly create strategic value to your clients. And so, yes, the first four practices are not sufficient when the world is changing extremely rapidly around us. And in fact, it continues to change even more rapidly. For example, newspaper advertising is down 3 times in 1 decade. And as we know, it is being disrupted by online advertising. Google now has more in revenue than the US magazine. So this was a very rapid change for the traditional businesses. The same as, with the CDs, and the sales are down 8 times in 1 decade. Again, a rapid change in your industry. Again, think about your own industry. I mean, in our industry, printing is obviously going down, so we had to transform ourselves into a totally different company, and luckily printing is not going down as fast as we all projected. And so we have time to transform, but there are companies. You can always see what's coming in your industry, and then being ready. How do you innovate so you don't get commoditized and basically become obsolete? So again, the CDs were disrupted by iTunes, for example, and so you can see that in multiple industries. I'm sure you can map your own industry on this, like Kodak with photography becoming all digital. I mean, they could see that also a long time in advance. The question is, how do you innovate and how do you get ready? And changes just happen much more quickly today than they did in the past. So here's my favorite proverb. I'm sure some of you might be able to read it. Can somebody read it? Yes. What does it say? Danger is a chance. Very good. So normally the word itself means danger or chaos or something really scary, crisis. But if you cover the crisis, right? Yes, crisis. But if I cover this and that word, what's that word? Opportunity. Yes. I didn't know you knew Chinese. Japanese. Okay. Is this also Japanese character? Same. Okay, good. So in crisis, there is opportunity, right? So you have, this is a crisis. The world is changing around you. What is the opportunity? Having an opportunity mindset, whether it's at work or in your private life, is it's very important. So see change as an opportunity. I mean, that's what innovators do. But you can manage it. You know change will happen. So don't only, and this chart was shown by Chris this morning and by Paul or Peter The two first speakers showed this chart. Many of you might be using it. It's existing market, new market, existing technologies, new technologies. We map all of our investments on this chart to make sure we have a balanced portfolio. But if you only focus on the core and do sustaining innovation in your core, no matter how successful your core is today, you will be disrupted. Because there will be other technologies, something coming that could significantly affect your core business. So you have to look at what are the, of course, constantly, not only sustaining innovation, but also disruptive innovation in your own market, and then looking how can I move into adjacent markets, or how can I totally create new markets and with new technology and so we call that stepping stone options on the upper right there. But so the two very important, I'm just going to give you two examples, one here and one there. The first one is transforming your offerings and adjusting your business model to really protect yourself about being disrupted. One example is when we used to sell just pure copiers, standalone copiers and printers, and then Xerox moved already 15 years ago into managed print services, where we sell a service to the client, whether it's a global client with 400 offices around the world, where you can allow the CIO to manage his or her print infrastructure remotely and lower the cost and make it more environmentally sustainable, et cetera. Or whether it's now we do managed print services, really small businesses, because if you do managed print service, then you're not commoditized. And in fact, the Gartner group lists Xerox as in the leaders quadrant, being the most visionary and best in executing managed print services. So but that's not our core. I mean, a lot of our printing business now is all managed print services. So one example is how do we build solutions on top of that infrastructure we have across the world, so that we become even more strategically critical to our clients. And so here is a solution around personalized education. So this is about personalized education. It also shows how we did ethnographic work in schools. These are the schools in upstate New York, where we have one of the research centers where the researchers lived in the classroom for quite a few years, working with the teachers on creating a personalized education solution, which again has now been selling for about a year. Okay, one more example on in new markets, new technologies. It's really new technologies and new business models. I mean, again, with Ignite too, we need to have a different business model. It's not that there is now, with printing, we make our money out of every page that's printed. In a solution, you have to figure out, how do I sell this to the teacher? So you have to truly think the business model, why innovating? When you go to stepping stone options, it becomes even harder because it is a new market, often new to the world, and there are new technologies. For example, the printed electronics, I would say, is a stepping stone option. It's still, I mean, there are many, and in fact, Thin Film has signed several deals with major companies and announced them publicly. So you will see these products hitting the market. But it was truly new technology, new market. It doesn't exist. You can do market studies on this particular approach. So it is very hard. It's the hardest innovation of all. But one project that we have been working on for the last 5 years or so is leveraging our strong imaging capabilities. I mean, in printing for decades, we have developed a very strong imaging capability and applying that to video analytics. We're in fact applying video analytics in our transportation infrastructure today for automatic parking or highway toll booths, et cetera. But here, the researcher who is going to be talking about his technology is applying it for sensing of remote vital signs and diseases. So it's a diagnostic innovation. And again, we're in the middle of trying to figure out how do we create a business out of this. Good. So here are partners. This was a collaboration between the research center in upstate New York and our research center in India, and we partnered with a hospital in India that truly gave us a lot of ongoing ideas of what to do. And we also have a partnership with the University of Rochester to look at AFib. I mean, we can measure several heart conditions now. We're up to about 10 diseases or vital signs, including diabetes, breast cancer, all through imaging, and of course, it's all being calibrated and lots of experiments ongoing. It's, again, very fascinating. If this works, you can envision handheld cameras to go into villages or to remotely diagnose a lot of diseases before you then send the person to the hospital. Good. So these are all 5 best practices. So truly understanding your users, your clients, pain points and their dreams. I mean, that's really where it all starts. Fostering an innovation culture, because people, I mean, the people in your company, whether you're a large company or a startup, they are the innovators. They are what counts. So when making this presentation, I was struggling. I moved back and forward. The 1 and 2 switched because they're really not in priority order. I mean, ultimately, it's all about the people, but you have to focus on your customers. So both of them are extremely important. Then innovating in a very agile way with many open innovation partners and managing a portfolio of investments and really thinking about how do you change your business model. But I really want to end with this slide, because ultimately innovation is very, very hard. You're exploring the unknown. You're often fighting for budgets and maverick teams, and it is really hard. And so you have to make sure you have fun. I think Chris mentioned it's about passion, hiring passionate people, making sure you create, again, this maverick team to truly be able to innovate and to be able to do what's impossible. So thank you very much.